Alright. Autumn is here, and so is the Bergen International Film Festival, short BIFF. I was lucky to attend some screenings, which I'm going to talk about in this video, and I'm also going to talk about some screenings which I missed, but some films that still were at the Bergen International Film Festival, which I watched already in February on the Berlinale Film Festival in Berlin. So let's get into the films. The first film I watched at the film festival was Semi. It was also the opening film, and the cast and director and some of the producers were present as well. Sorrily, it was also for me the worst film I watched at the film festival, which kind of makes sense because the other films are more highlights. Well, this is Norwegian debut film, like it's only been on one other festival before coming here, so it's like it debuted here before coming out in the rest of Norway. So in that way, it was kind of cool to see like something new. This is a Norwegian film directed by Nina Krag, and it explores immigration and problematic sexual relationships within that when it comes to different power dynamics with like local Norwegians initiating relationship with some of the people who have immigrated here but hasn't gotten their like kind of green card, you would say in English. And it's a movie with quite a lot of potential. It has interesting ideas, and its thematics, like I explained, is quite fascinating in a way, but the characters in the end fall a bit flat for me. They do a lot of things instinctively, and things kind of make sense, but we never go deeper into the characters. And the cast had a lot of good things to say about what the characters stood for and stuff, but it wasn't just possible to see on screen. As well as the direction was a bit flat. It was like a lot of simple choices used. Overall, it was an okay movie, but I longed for a bit more. Yeah. She has potential, so I hope she does something more in the future, but we'll see. The second film I watched at BIFF was Julia Ducournau's Alpha. Alpha was first screened at the Cannes Film Festival, and when I saw it was picked out in the program, I got really excited. I was thinking that this was gonna be the new Raw, the new Titan, maybe even more deep and more disgusting in a way, or like crazier, but it ended up being more of a drama, which I've read about, but it ended up landing a little bit more in a niche place, I would say. But in many ways, still very interesting. My overall main problem with this is how loose and not complete it feels. The pacing feels very off at times, and it's kind of like a bit sluggish. You don't know quite where it's headed, but it's always interesting enough for me to keep my attention with it. And it's some really, really cool scenes here and there, but it's like it just feels a bit more confused than her earlier movies, which feels very tight and well paced. It's maybe possible to compare this with Beau is Afraid, actually, in the Ari Aster sense, where his two first movies felt very paced and very logic in a way, while Beau is Afraid went very off the rails and didn't make quite as much sense. Even though I would say Ari Aster's third feature hit a little bit better for me than this one. This felt very out of place. But I promised myself since 4 years ago, when I first watched Titan for the first time at the Haugesund Film Festival, I swear myself as a cult fan of Julia Ducournau, and I still feel the same this day. So even for how sluggish this film felt for me personally, I still enjoyed a lot of the moments in the film, and what I usually takes as a Julia Ducournau like moves, like her tracking shots, some of them, and how she uses the music, and how you have like these big character climaxes, especially the climax towards the end here was phenomenal, I think. And I feel it's like a great movie hidden in here somewhere. It just didn't quite hit here. But she has really cool like character moments where like everything just explodes. And I love that. And I love her style in that sense. But this was not quite it. So, but I'm even more excited to see what she does next when she's this ambitious. It could end up being something really cool if she manages to tighten the pace a little bit. So it's a 4 out of 5. Third film I watched of the Bergen International Film Festival was Benny Safdie's Smashing Machine, which stars The Rock, also known as Dwayne Johnson, and Emily Blunt as his girlfriend, per se. This is one of the more serious The Rock roles he had in a long time. In most of his films, he's been branded as very likable, and he's like always been playing himself, like through like the Baywatch remake and Jumanji, and just every film I've done, he's always been in like the same category of a character. But here he really gets to play something he has experience with before, which I think helped him a lot, but also that he gets to be a lot more dramatic while still keeping a lot of his charisma, which really helps you to go through this film and go through this tough shit alongside with him. So I think Benny Safdie really manages to capture real vulnerability about a wrestler who is not really a character you would think were human. It's not the right way to say it, but you wouldn't see his humanity all the way through in that sense, because you see him as this big fighter and this big person, but that he has so much humanity lying around him, and that he wants to express it but doesn't manage to. It's something really beautiful in that Benny Safdie manages to capture. Yet cast around it felt a bit more forgotten screenplay wise, which makes sense. It's the protagonist which is the most important to flesh out properly, but it felt that the action felt a bit flat when it came to the characters around, especially Emily Blunt's character. And it's a lot of handheld, which helps with like this kind of documentarian feel. So it feels pretty real when you're watching it. And it's one of the cases where it helps that it's a true story as well, that it feels a bit more grounded in that sense. It was a real cool scene towards the start, which I liked. It said something about Benny Safdie's direction and his precision in a sense, where so Emily Blunt is like holding the cat like she's a baby in a way, while The Rock Johnson, Dwayne Johnson, wants the cat on the floor, which are saying of something about what their future longs to be in a way. It fell a little bit apart in the second act. Then I wasn't very interested in the drama. It's more interesting what his character was doing with the wrestling, and the drama at home kinda is interesting, but not interesting enough. I felt that felt a little bit flat for me. But either way, a really cool movie, and a strong performance as well from Dwayne Johnson. So it's a 3.5 or something. Big An's Resurrection is a giant stylistically love letter to cinema and cinematography. Spoiler! ! Best to go in blind on this, but to comment on its structure, this film goes through film history through this immortal being, representing cinema as a whole, which lives through different types and times of cinema, with the style evolving as we go. It starts in 4x3, homaging the likes of Nosferatu and other classics. Further, it ventures into a classic neo-noir with a beautiful mirror sequence with a very dark and messy tone. I think this might be my favorite of all of them, except maybe the last story. Afterwards, it becomes a philosophical piece about isolation and morale, before then becoming a heist film. And then again, a vampire love story. So, what's there not to miss? And plus, this vampire love story had one of the most cool cinematography, very like flowy, modern stuff, which was really cool. And then it comes back in to a circle composition, reaching where we first started, and ending the whole film in this candlelight cinema with like glowing people watching as the credits roll, and you're like sitting there, and that is like, whoa, this is what cinema is to me, at least as a film nerd, and like to very many other people who are in love with cinema. It's like this glowing effect we get when we leave the cinema and we watch something truly special. And I think a lot of people can at least mention it with one film they watched throughout their lives, one film which has changed their lives or touched them in some way, that they understand something more about what it means to be human. And Bigan's love letter to cinematography specifically, and how we capture film, but also what film is supposed to be to us as individuals, is a really powerful thing. And I was really amazed about Bigan's technical power, but also his ambition for what he wants to do with this medium. So this is a easy 4.5 out of 5 for me. The last film I watched of Biff, my fifth and final film, and this is an all-time low film-wise. Usually I watch at least 12 or 14 films, but my energy capacity weren't quite there. But at least the last film I watched was Jafar Panahi. Hope I'm pronouncing it at least somewhat right. Film Just an Accident. And this was really, really cool. I felt that was what I ended up going out to the cinema thinking. It's not cool in the way the themes it explores, but it was very cool how it was so masterfully done by Panahi. He has this very light, darkly comedic tone almost throughout the whole film, except the last 10 to 15 minutes were quite intense and changed the mood quite drastically. Kind of like Bong Joon-ho film, which can be darkly comedic and then very darkly serious about its thematics. Also the most interesting thing about this film was the themes it explores from both perspective, as the one who is the antagonist and has created pain to a victim, and how the victim sees itself and its long for revenge, and how that can change through a conversation, or what might be maybe a one-sided conversation in a way, but still. So it's interesting to see how we as humans find ways to justify the things we do, even if the things we do are quite horrible in a general sense. So that was really cool. And also especially the liberalism versus conservatism themes here is also very interesting, with the thought of the Iranian government and that kind of stuff. How you have a new generation which wants to live their own lives but are stuck in conservatism, laws and rules, and who's really in the right, kinda, is what makes it the most interesting to me. Even though as a Norwegian very liberal person, you would also say that you're in the right and that all humans have the same rights. But it's interesting to see how some societies hasn't moved away from that conservatism and why they're not moving, and it's just a general interesting talking notes. Yeah. Either way, a really cool sound design towards the end or throughout the film, really. It's quite funny. I wish my cinema companions were a bit more with me on the dark humor. People weren't laughing that much. They were like taking it a bit serious with the kidnapping and stuff. And yeah, one of the more interesting talking notes about this film is its competition with Sentimental Value at Cannes. Sentimental Value was kind of written on as one of the favorites to take the Palme d'Or, ended up taking the silver prize or second place instead, while this took the first place. And for me, the films hit quite similar emotionally. Sentimental Value was a really cool film, but felt like a director who was like a bit show-offy, and even though it was good at times, it was not that redeeming as The Worst Person in the World for me at least. Well, this hits kinda at the same emotional level for me at least, but it had this like political note and a bit more sharper ideas of the world and where we stand in a way, and it kind of delved a little bit more into that. So I'm very happy that this won the Palm over Sentimental Value, even though I'm Norwegian and I love Sentimental Value, and it's very cool that Norwegian cinema can reach so high levels that it kinda could have. It was a close race to win the Palm, and that is in itself really cool. But it's also cool to be beaten by really good films. So, yeah. Overall, a really good film. 4.5 out of 5. Oh yeah, let's get into them. The one I appreciate the most, which has the funniest name as well and was the biggest surprise when I was at the Berlinale, is Lesbian Space Princess, which is just a gay lesbian, very fun time, and it's really funny. It has this very Cartoon Network style, so it doesn't feel like very premium, but they managed to tell the story as effectively as they could. So everything serves the story. It's incredibly funny, even for a straight white male as me, and we're the butt of the joke a lot of the time in that film. But it's deserved. It's they hit some really nice points, and it's really fun to watch a movie which is so charismatic in a way, and so light and so fun and takes its characters seriously instead of painting them very nicely. They have a lot of depth, so that I felt was really cool. Also, one of the cooler films, which actually won an award at the Bergen International Film Festival, was If I Had Legs, I Would Kick You. It won the Cinema Extraordinaire, which is our award for this film festival award for films that stands out, but are good films. Yeah, so films that are not necessarily your typical cinema films, but are like pushing the boundaries of what cinema could be in a way. And this film was extremely cool when I watched it. It was like tense, it was thrilling, it was funny, it was very uncomfortable a lot of the time, but overall a very good experience and a film that sits with you long after you have watched it. Also watched Rado Jude's Continental 25, which they actually had two films of at the BIFF this year. I didn't manage to catch his new film, which he called Dracula, but I believe it's pretty good. This film was as well pretty cool. It's this kind of middle-age crisis kind of film, which goes into very philosophical ideas. I watched a lot of films on that film festival, so I don't entirely remember the themes specifically they went into, but I remember it being very like anti-capitalist and commenting on how capitalist structures throws people on the street, for example, and how afflicts other people then again. So I found that to be very interesting, and I feel he has a very good and clear voice and a very clear message in each of his films. Like he's very objective in a way, so it's like not like this is bad, but he just like this is freaking happening, and I kind of love that about his films. They're very quiet in that way, but kind of very stylistically interesting. And the only German film at this program, as I'm aware of, was Maria Weiss, which I also watched with Bill and Ali, which is a film about surveillance and how we act when we know we're surveilled by others, which I felt was very interesting because this is happening in a family dynamic and how that is changing, but it's a bigger comment to take here how surveillance in the big world is changing us and how much we should share with the world, maybe. That if we share too much, then the world will see too much of us in a way, and then we will feel surveilled. And also that all our devices are listening to us as well could be a big problem in the future. And like drawing parallels to George Orwell's 1985, with those kind of ideas of surveillance on how they can create fascism in many ways. So the film doesn't go that deep, but it's exploring themes on the surface level of this. So that I also felt it was quite cool. Quite cool stylistically at times, even though it looked a bit flat as well at times. But it served the story, so it worked. All in all, Biff delivered quite well. It was a few good films that I got to watch, and it's always fun to experience this film early and in a cinema nerd environment. It's a lot more interested people in these screenings than the people you often have on your normal cinema screenings, which often heightens the experience, but sometimes not. But it definitely is nice to feel a little bit of the festival mood, and it's always cool to catch some films early before they're being released later in the cinema, and some films that you never would have seen if you hadn't catch them here. So overall, fun experience, good films. Go and check out these films for yourself, make your own opinion, and have a great day.